The purpose of this tutorial is to discuss how Excel handles absolute and relative references when they're in formulas that you copy from one cell to another. We're going to start with relative reference because that's the default way that Excel enters all cell IDs. I have an example on my worksheet here that is an hourly payroll. And you can see I have several employees and I know the number of hours that they worked regular time, the number of overtime hours, and then their hourly rate. So to calculate their regular wages for this first employee, I'm going to enter a simple formula that says equal, and I'm clicking on the first employee's regular hours, so I see the cell reference B3. And I say times, and click on that employee's hourly pay rate, and I get the cell reference D3. Now both of those cell references are what we refer to as a relative reference. And when you have a formula in Excel that has relative references, when you copy that formula from one cell to another, Excel will update the cell references in relation to the move that you've made. Okay, let's look at it so it's clear. So I'm clicking back on the cell with my formula, and you can see up here the value of the formula is equal B3 times D3. Now I'm going to grab the fill handle for that formula and copy it down one row. And now I want to see what it updated this formula to for the second employee. So I'm going to click on E4. Notice that it updated the formula when it moved it down that row from B3 times D4 to B3 times D3. It updated it to B4 times D4. And when I take it down one more row, it updates it from B4 to D4 to B5 times D5. Now, interestingly, when you copy that same formula, though, over a column, so we're starting with the formula B3 times D3, and I copy it over one column. Now I'm going to click on that formula. Notice that it updates the B3 times D3, and it will change to C3 times E3. Since I moved over a column, it took the original cell references and updated each column plus 1. So B went to C, D went to E. And you see those results here. Okay, so that's how it treats relative references. Now, absolute references are a little bit different. An absolute reference, you don't want Excel to change. So in this cell, I'm going to enter the formula to calculate overtime. So I'm going to say equal, and I'm clicking on the first employee's overtime hours times their hourly rate times, and I give an overtime shift differential of 1.5. So I'm paying them 1.5 times their regular rate. Now for this particular formula, when I copy it, I don't want the B12 to change. I always want each formula in this cell, this cell, this cell to point to that same overtime rate. So what I do is I press my F4 key one time, and notice that it changes that reference to $B, $12. That's an absolute reference, and Excel will never change an absolute reference when it's in a formula that's copied from one cell to another. So let's copy that one and see what happens. So there I calculated my first employee's overtime rate, and it took his overtime hours times his rate times my overtime differential down here. Let's copy it down one cell, and now I'm clicking on that new cell, and notice it updated the formula to say this time C4 times D4, but it kept B12 as an absolute reference. So that is absolute and relative references in Excel. They're very powerful, and they allow you to enter formulas one time and copy them to the remaining cells in your worksheet.